Hi, Kathy. Um, this is a recording, but it's on. So I have another student, so I don't know if the title of this will be slightly different or what. But um, I wanted to go ahead and look at color. What were we talking about? And then Hilma. So first looking at the water lilies, the Monets, and then looking at Hilma of Klint. And there's a nice short little video on her, and I'll show you where that is. But let's go to the screen. And actually, I think I need to go to, sorry, I know where I need to go. I'm going to stop that. Sometimes it's just tricky to find things. Okay, so hopefully as I click through the slides, you'll see them. So this is the work that I wanted to show you early on today. And I think the sense of, first the layering, the movement, the color scheme is within, and these are the technical sort of heady things, and then we can talk about the gut feeling behind this, and all the work actually. um, so there's a tremendous layering. I think there's a misconception that Monet sort of went into the landscape and layered all the colors, right? But if he did that, then he would have had mush, um, because they would blend all together. Here the colors are crisp and clear, and they stay within their families. So even though there's a red with a pinky, the green with a pink next to it, and that pink is hovering in all these little spots and spaces, and he must have been looking at how the colors are bouncing around. I think that was his main interest, is to really see atmosphere. I think for a long time, artists were subtle enough to perceive the halo around people, the heat around people. Um, but I think what Monet was doing is he was actually observing particles, atmosphere, and how that atmosphere is affected, or how color, in fact, represents the atmosphere, the whole of it. So there's this amazing, and it reminds me of course, of your work too. But there's an underneath the whole of it. There's quite a lot of darks actually layered underneath. So there's greens throughout, right, which are relatively dark. I mean, the light colors come on top. And then there's blues that are hovering underneath the layers of pinks and purples and light greens that are hovering on top. These all read in the same family, but there's about 3 or 4 or 5 different colors in there. There's light orange looking color, there's a purple color, there's a green color, and these sort of pools of families must have been on his palette, either before, or maybe before he started painting. They were all there, or he was painting on top of a drier paint underneath painting. So I think there's a misconception in Monet that he sort of, I mean, he did go outdoors and paint, of course, but he definitely let the colors, the chinks underneath, peek through of the other colors. And that holds this sort of, even though there's a million colors on this, it holds the thing together. It holds the, first of all, the vibrancy of the whole thing is super exciting. Um, it's the action of being alive. It's like the momentum that he had, especially at the end when he's sort of circling these lighter. He's having so much fun. I mean, it's clear how much fun he's having. Anyway, hopefully when I click on the next slide, you'll be able to see it. This is another water lily, and have a look. Look at the motion of the water, right? How it goes around the water lilies. We can talk about the water lilies in a second, but for now, look at the reflections in the water and the motion of them. How he knew how he was following that water, and looking not only at following the water, but also looking at the colors within that water, but having that whole thing sit in its own sort of space. It's the reflection of the sky above the greens, right? So it's the reflection of the sky way, way above, reflected in the water. But to be able to find these colors that are different, but sitting together, they're the same value. Or the colors of the greens and reds, browns within those trees are also quite nice, all softly edged. So having somehow put down, let's look at it together. So he has laid this in with the purples on the top, and the purple is a key player throughout the whole thing. So this purple is under and hovering, or he's dotting it all the way around his canvas. He dotted it here. He has this picking up the purple over here, and certainly in the top third of the painting. Then he's coming in with his blues, his pinks. It gets light, right? And he has this lightest family. So he has dark at the top, right? Not dark, dark, super dark, but dark at the top, dark at the bottom, and he has this medium light coming from the reflection of the sky again. And then he's doing the drastic, thicker paint that's coming in with the absolute light of the water lilies and the darks that are within those water lilies. So he's it's amazing to be able to have this spatial dynamic that's happening between the reflection of the water, which goes this way. Talk about another dimension, right? This way down, and then still having perspective, things kind of hovering in pools in the water lilies on top. And then he is coming in with these little chinky dots of water that's just glistening on the painting on the water lilies. This is my teacher, Claire, and talking and Gavronsky, and she this is a large, large painting, but I'll talk about it a little bit later, where it's layers and layers of people, and then how you step out from that dimension. Um, and she, you know, she being a teacher, having this wonderful these figures that all you need is a little chalkboard and the chalk, and you need to teach. Just such a good painting. Anyway, back to Monet. Um, we have okay, so we have the drama of this is in the lighting, and he's so aware of the light and where it's coming from, how it's affecting the whole of the landscape. So coming and thinking about the whole, and I don't know if this must be pastel. I don't know if it's oil or maybe it's I don't know. Whatever. Okay. So the whole being this orange brown color that's at the bottom underneath the whole water, actually the entire surface, right? Being this kind of brown, whole of it over the entire. So the canvas must have been stained in that brown first. So you have a middle ground. Um, and then coming in with this absolute sort of white and getting the light, but I think that might have happened after, but getting that absolute light in the corner and how it radiates down. I mean, he has this directional stroke that's happening in the background, like when the light penetrates through clouds, and you can see the effects of that. Then you have that light playing beautifully on the water, and then how he's observing, it's so fun, how he's observing those little orange highlights of what happens on water when it strikes. So it's not only the white of the waves, it's these little orange things that are happening as well. And then in the shadows, to get the city or whatever, if it's Venice or whatever, um, getting that city a darker value, not black. He's not. This is he is looking at how the buildings are hovering also in atmosphere. There's some distance between him and the buildings. He's farther away from them. It's like the purple mountains when you have, of course, the mountains are isn't purple, but because we have atmosphere between us and the mountain, it feels purple. That the color's purple. Um, which is so interesting. That means there must be so many things that are happening in the atmosphere to cause it to be that. So you have the blue that is creating, and then you have in the same family blue and purple working together, and then you have the blue of the water that he layers in with in just a different direction of stroke. It's so fascinating to look at and analyze. the works and how they were layered and how, I can imagine how when I was painting, or even maybe how he was feeling when he was painting that. Because these have it. These are okay. So looking at the haystacks in winter, right? And look at the palette scheme. And for him, it wasn't light and dark. It wasn't as dark, 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 dark as I mean, in some of them they are. But when it's in a winter scene, this is what the light looks like. If there's snow all over the ground, it's much, much lighter. The air is lighter because it's bouncing reflection from the sun. And so the whole of the landscape looks white or light, and it's luminous. So he has, so there's no distinction between ground and sort of the sky because that atmosphere, the snow covers everything. Um, really beautiful transitions of light into light, just a slightly different color, like light purple, light orange, or light orange maybe underneath the whole thing because it's kind of everywhere. Maybe the whole canvas might have been sort of a yellow orange base, maybe, or he's just a master of getting the chinks in as he's painting the whole surface. Um, right, those purples for whatever foliage is in the back. And then having the haystacks slightly darker value, not drastically different, but just drastic enough so that they're substantial, that they have a different, and just through value and just through color, just making it one step or two steps darker than the previous one, and then finding again, looking really carefully and finding the colors, finding that haystacks that look brown to everybody else, or whatever the peachy color is of haystacks, and then finding pinks in it as the light hits, purples in it in the shadows, the snow covered patches, just so good, just so fun, 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 fun. Another fun one. All right, so how do we go about with this one? Is it that this little pinky that's coming in from the back, is that what maybe glows in the background behind most of the blue? Maybe. And maybe it's a complement to the green that is also happening in the sky behind, and it's closer. The heat of the atmosphere around the buildings becomes the sky becomes green, a light green. And actually that green is throughout the atmosphere there. And in fact, if you want a bright, bright sky, there's a little bit of green in it. Um, and then those beautiful blues and purples and lovely. And look, for this pole that's in the shadow to make it really dark, he just hits it with a really dark, dark red. And I mean, that could be straight out of the tube, red and blue for the shadow. How nice, right? To be bold enough. First, everything is in sort of one value scheme, one value scale, and then coming in and being really brave and hitting because the light now is probably an orange, like a setting sun, right? It's coming from this direction because you can see how it's hitting the plane of this building right here. Um, and you have the illumination of some of these gondola sticks that they put the gondolas in. um, you have them hit with that bright, bright orange sun, um, which hits some of the building as well. And as it comes closer, it gets darker, and therefore you can have red and then that deep shadow of complete blue. So nice. It's like out of the tube, red and blue. So brave. When I was so brave. Okay, we'll look at yeah, talk about brave. Come on. All right, light, right? Light and dark and working between those two, but in the darks, seeing tremendous color. So light, illuminated, bright, and it's layered though. There's white underneath here for sure. There's so much light because this continues, and then there's a little just light coming on top. But most of it, the sky is then orange, illuminated, lighting out. I mean, he must have been studying the sky so much. Um, so beautiful, right? Seeing the little purples underneath the pinks or in the pinks, and then coming in with your blues, but look, there's even green. I mean, it's like the whole rainbow is in Monet's painting. Anyway, the row of the foliage here, but I wanted to also talk about Hilma. So you can see, you can get the point from this one that you can use your whole palette as long as it sits in the values, right? As long as it's the darkness of the blue and the red coexist. They're within the same family. They're dark, they're a little bit darker at the when there's a complete edge when you're seeing the top of the haystack in relation to light behind it because the light illuminates it, making the shadow really, really dark. Light is in relation to dark. Light comes the form, hits the form on one side, and because light cannot bend, usually it gets gradually, gradually darker until very, very dark on the opposite side when where the light cannot get there. Um, so colors follow in the same direction or the same way. All right, let's go to Hilma now. Um, Here we go. So it was this extraordinary, this fantastic show. Um, and I gave a talk about her at the MA, but I'm not sure if you were there. So the spiral, and she was at the Guggenheim, and she had a vision that she want this is where the work should be, and she drew the whole thing, and she lived in the 1800. I mean, I think it was at the turn of the century, 1890, I think, around that time, but like 20 years before the first sort of modernist or Mondrian or Kandinsky, or like 20 years before those guys, and there was no symbolic painting as far as um, art history is concerned. So she couldn't have seen anything. So my question is, of course, that she was, of course, tied somehow to some spiritual something. But these were her ordinary paintings. Like she was a painter. She was trained as a painter. She sold landscapes, like normal stuff, and her, portraits, and she did stuff like that. But she spent 9 years creating her monumental cycle, the paintings for the temple. Isn't that amazing? The paintings for the temple in 1906 to 1915, which she planned to develop into a temple for her art. Curiously, her description of that sacred space sounds awfully like Frank Lloyd Wright's design of the Guggenheim Museum. Auf Klimt envisioned a nearly circular four-story building connected to a central spiral staircase. The structure she believed would be imbued with a certain power and calm. It's extraordinary. I mean, it's extraordinary to have that vision. Anyway, and and these are the type of paintings. So above and below, planets, horizons, and these are large, large paintings. So she's this woman. Um, I think of Klimt was from either the Netherlands or Sweden, um, but she held seances with a number of women, and she she talked to mediums or wrote down the notations in these series and series of sketchbooks. But then she came up with paintings like this. And the question is where, how, from what does that mean? Light, dark, always light and dark in relation to one another. The colors, which is fascinating to me, the light and dark versions of those colors. Um, and then having these incredible, the primaries, red, yellow, and blue, but then turning orange and this dark blue or dark purple, maybe. So it's just fascinating to analyze her work, and there's hundreds of these kinds of paintings that she had no. I mean, she had to have been on a different plane to be, I think, painting these. And she stipulated that the work should not be shown until 20 years after her death, because the world wasn't ready for her work. Amazing, right? These pyramids. Look at the transitions in color. Um, the geometry of them, it's nothing like it was being painted at the time, right? And then in this void of space, pyramid to the sun, reference to Egyptian culture, like your guess is as good as mine. Top triangle goes into space. into the spatial dimensions with it being black. So these are the paintings. So oh, and she drew the DNA strand before DNA was discovered. So it's mind blowing, really is. Right. So the symbols, and for her, all of those symbols had a meaning. I think people are just starting to decode her work and the symbols that are within it. She had repetitive motifs. She had the spiral. She also had collision between life and death with the swans. The swans would collide, the black swan. I think it's just amazing. The white swan on black background, the black swan on a white background in relation to what we were talking about today. So you have to tell me what you see in these works, because that's the exciting part. This is the DNA strand that hadn't been invented, or that hadn't been discovered. Right, again, above and below. What does that mean? The lighting of it, the colors of it, it's just amazing. To me, it's amazing. It's extraordinary. Hundreds and hundreds of these paintings. There's a little sort of angel and devil, I think, together, meeting together at the center of the planet. What planet? Which planet? And where? I mean, even to stretch these canvases that are large. Oh, and these are her largest series. I mean, in relation to people, it's just her largest 8, I think, works. Just massive, and it follows life through life at the beginning and middle and at old age. It's these stages in life that she's depicting. But your guess as to what these actually mean is as good as anyone else's, because we don't know. To me, when I saw the series, I was just blown away. And this is a woman, a painter no one had ever heard of. Um, she had colors. This is from the sketchbook where she is drawing both there's the spiral is a repetitive force. There's colors that represent masculine and feminine forces. Um, it's just out of this world. It's amazing. That was her. She was just painting in her studio. Yeah, and and the fact that she never exhibited these works during her lifetime is also, I think, quite revolutionary, to think about doing a series of work that is not for the public, or at least not for the public just yet. Anyway, and this is Michelle Prozac, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Okay, that's all for tonight. I'll see you next week. We can talk about or discuss any concept you would like. Let me know what you want to do. If you want to bring any pastels, you're certainly welcome. I'll have the pencils, and I think I'll be doing some. I'll try to work with some oil pastels on the deck, so that there's no medium. Okay, be well.